Tonight, we're going to journey through the landscape of memory itself. Not just the act of remembering, but the intricate architecture of how memories form, where they live in the vast corridors of your brain, and why they sometimes fade like morning mist or burn bright across decades. We'll explore everything from the fragile construction of your earliest childhood recollections to the strange phenomenon of remembering things that never happened at all. We'll visit the neural pathways that light up when you recall your first day of school, the chemical cascades that preserve the scent of your grandmother's kitchen, and the mysterious processes that let you ride a bicycle decades after you learned, even if you can't quite remember learning at all. Some of what you hear tonight might surprise you, some might comfort you, and some might simply give your mind something soft to rest upon as sleep slowly arrives. Before we begin, if these calm explorations help you unwind, or if you'd like to support more content like this, consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It helps others find their way here too, one curious mind at a time. Now, let's begin our exploration of memory, that invisible thread that weaves your past into your present and carries you forward into tomorrow. The architecture of memory. Your brain is not a filing cabinet, though we often speak of it that way. It's not a hard drive that stores perfect copies of moments, neatly organized in folders labeled by year and category. Instead, memory is a living, breathing process distributed across vast networks of neurons, firing in synchrony, creating patterns that echo and reshape themselves each time you remember. At the heart of this process sits a small, curved structure deep in your brain called the hippocampus. Named after the Greek word for seahorse because of its distinctive shape, the hippocampus is your memory's master organizer. When you experience something new, whether it's meeting someone for the first time, learning a new route through your neighborhood, or tasting an unfamiliar food, your hippocampus is hard at work. It doesn't store the memory itself, not permanently at least, but it coordinates the process of encoding that experience and gradually transferring it to other parts of your brain for long-term storage. Research has shown that people with damage to their hippocampus can still access old memories formed before the injury, but they struggle terribly to form new ones. The famous case of a patient known as HM, who had his hippocampus removed in an attempt to control severe epilepsy, demonstrated this vividly. After his surgery in the 1950s, HM could remember his childhood and much of his early adult life, but he couldn't form new long-term memories. Every day was like waking up fresh, with no memory of what had happened the day before, or even an hour before. He would meet the same doctors repeatedly and greet them as strangers each time. His case taught neuroscientists invaluable lessons about how memory is not one single thing, but a constellation of processes operating in different regions of the brain. Adjacent to the hippocampus lies the amygdala, an almond-shaped cluster of nuclei that serves as your brain's emotional processing center. The amygdala doesn't just help you feel emotions, it also decides which memories deserve to be stored with extra strength. This is why emotionally charged experiences, whether joyful or traumatic, tend to create more vivid and lasting memories than mundane everyday events. Your amygdala acts like a yellow highlighter, marking certain memories as especially important, ensuring they're consolidated more deeply and retrieved more easily later. Think about your most vivid memories. Chances are they're tied to strong emotions. Perhaps your wedding day, the birth of a child, a moment of profound loss, or even a spectacular sunset that moved you to tears. These memories persist not because you've rehearsed them more, but because your amygdala tagged them as significant at the moment of encoding. The emotional intensity triggered the release of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, which in turn enhanced the consolidation process, essentially telling your brain that this moment matters and needs to be preserved. The prefrontal cortex, located at the very front of your brain just behind your forehead, plays a crucial role in what's called working memory. This is the mental workspace where you hold and manipulate information temporarily. When you're trying to remember a phone number long enough to dial it, doing mental arithmetic, or following a complex set of directions, your prefrontal cortex is actively engaged. This region is also involved in retrieving long-term memories and deciding which memories are relevant to your current task or goal. Interestingly, your prefrontal cortex is one of the last brain regions to fully mature, which is why children and teenagers often struggle with tasks requiring sustained attention and complex planning. It's also one of the first regions to show decline as we age, which partly explains why older adults might have trouble with multitasking or remembering where they place their keys, even while their long-term memories of distant events remain crystal clear. Throughout your brain, memories are not stored in single locations, but distributed across networks. A memory of your grandmother might involve visual information stored in your visual cortex, the sound of her voice processed in your auditory cortex, the warmth of her hugs registered in your somatosensory cortex, and the emotional feeling of her presence tagged by your amygdala. When you recall this memory, all these different regions activate in concert, recreating a unified experience from scattered neural patterns. This distributed nature of memory explains why brain damage often affects certain types of memories, while leaving others intact. Someone might lose the ability to recognize faces, while still remembering names, or vice versa. The brain's remarkable redundancy and plasticity mean that sometimes, when one area is damaged, other areas can partially compensate, rerouting the neural pathways to preserve function as much as possible. At the cellular level, memories are thought to be encoded through changes in synapses, the tiny gaps between neurons where chemical and electrical signals pass from one cell to another. When you learn something new, the connections between certain neurons strengthen. Repeated activation of the same neural pathway makes that connection more efficient, a process called long-term potentiation. This is the physical basis of the old saying that neurons that fire together wire together. Imagine a forest path. The first time someone walks through, they leave barely a trace. But if that same path is walked repeatedly, it becomes well-worn, easier to follow, more permanent. Your neural pathways work similarly. The more you retrieve a memory, the stronger that pathway becomes, which is why rehearsal and repetition are such effective learning strategies. But here's something remarkable. Every time you retrieve a memory, you're not just playing back a recording, you're actually reconstructing it from its component parts. And in that reconstruction, the memory can change. Details can be added, lost, or modified. This is why eyewitness testimony can be so unreliable, and why two people can remember the same event quite differently. Each time you remember, you're essentially creating a new version of that memory, influenced by your current knowledge, beliefs, and emotional state. Your brain also possesses the ability to form new neurons throughout your life, a process called neurogenesis. This was once thought impossible. Neuroscientists believed you were born with all the neurons you'd ever have. But research has shown that the hippocampus, in particular, continues to generate new neurons even in adulthood. Physical exercise, learning new skills, and engaging in novel experiences all promote neurogenesis, potentially enhancing your capacity for forming new memories. The cerebellum, a structure at the back of your brain that looks like a small, wrinkled walnut, is crucial for procedural memory, the type of memory that allows you to perform learned motor skills without conscious thought. When you tie your shoes, ride a bike, type on a keyboard, or play a musical instrument, you're relying on procedural memories stored in your cerebellum and related motor regions. These memories are remarkably durable and resistant to forgetting. Even after years without practice, you can usually recall how to perform these skills, though perhaps with less fluency than before. What makes procedural memory so robust is that it doesn't rely on conscious recollection. You don't need to remember the day you learned to swim or the specific steps your teacher taught you. Your body simply knows, guided by deeply ingrained neural patterns that operate below the level of conscious awareness. This is why you can perform these skills while thinking about something else entirely, and why it's often harder to explain how to do something than to simply do it. The architecture of memory is layered and complex, a masterpiece of biological engineering refined over millions of years of evolution. Each structure has its role, each network its function, and together they create the seamless experience of remembering that feels so effortless, yet involves coordination across billions of neurons. As you rest tonight, these same structures are at work, processing today's experiences, deciding what to keep and what to let fade, weaving the thread of your life's narrative, one synapse at a time. Types of memory systems. Memory is not a single, unified system, but a collection of different types, each with its own characteristics, brain regions, and functions. Understanding these different memory systems helps explain why you can remember how to ride a bike, but forget someone's name moments after being introduced, or why you can recall your childhood phone number, but struggle to remember what you had for breakfast 3 days ago. Let's begin with sensory memory, the briefest form of memory and one you might not even realize you possess. Sensory memory holds impressions from your senses for just a fraction of a second. When you glance at a scene and then close your eyes, you might retain a fleeting visual after image for a moment before it fades. That's your iconic memory, the visual component of sensory memory. Similarly, echoic memory holds auditory information for a few seconds. This is why you can sometimes ask someone to repeat something they just said, but before they do, you suddenly realize you actually did hear it. Your echoic memory briefly retained the sound, giving your brain a second chance to process it. These ultra-short sensory memories serve as a buffer, allowing your brain to decide what's worth paying attention to and what can be discarded. Given the massive amount of sensory information bombarding you every second, your brain needs some way to filter what enters deeper processing. Sensory memory provides that first level of filtering, holding information just long enough for you to decide if it merits further attention. Short-term memory, sometimes called primary memory, holds information for roughly 15 to 30 seconds without rehearsal. This is the memory system at work when someone tells you a phone number and you repeat it to yourself until you can write it down. Without that repetition, the information quickly fades. The capacity of short-term memory, according to psychologist George Miller's famous 1956 paper, is around 7 items, plus or minus 2. This finding, often called Miller's magic number, has been influential for decades, though more recent research suggests the true capacity might be closer to 4 chunks of information, particularly when accounting for different types of material and how items are organized. This limited capacity explains why phone numbers are broken into chunks, and why you might struggle to remember a long grocery list without writing it down. However, through a process called chunking, you can expand the effective capacity of short-term memory by grouping individual items into meaningful units. For instance, instead of trying to remember the sequence 1 to 9 to 4 to 5 to 2 to 0 to 2 to 0, you might chunk it as the years 1945 and 2020, reducing 8 individual digits to just 2 meaningful chunks. Working memory is closely related to short-term memory, but involves not just storage, but also manipulation of information. When you're solving a math problem in your head, reading a complex sentence and holding earlier parts in mind while processing later parts, or planning a series of actions to accomplish a goal, you're using working memory. This system is central to reasoning, comprehension, and learning. It's your brain's mental workspace, where you actively hold and transform information in service of cognitive tasks. Working memory relies heavily on the prefrontal cortex and has limited capacity, which is why multitasking is often so difficult. When you try to do multiple demanding tasks simultaneously, you're essentially competing for the same limited working memory resources, leading to decreased performance on both tasks. This is why driving while having an intense phone conversation can be dangerous, even with a hands-free device. The conversation consumes working memory resources needed for safely navigating traffic. Long-term memory is where information can be stored for extended periods, from hours to an entire lifetime. Unlike short-term and working memory, long-term memory has essentially unlimited capacity. You never fill up your long-term memory and run out of space for new information. However, getting information into long-term memory requires consolidation, a process that can take hours or even days, and is particularly dependent on sleep. Long-term memory itself divides into two major categories. Explicit memory, also called declarative memory, involves conscious recollection of facts and events. This is the memory you use when you deliberately try to remember something, when you recall what you did last weekend, or answer a trivia question. Explicit memory further divides into episodic memory and semantic memory. Episodic memory is your memory for personal experiences and specific events in your life. It's the memory that allows you to mentally travel back in time and re-experience moments from your past. When you remember your high school graduation, your first kiss, or what you did on your last birthday, you're accessing episodic memory. These memories have a rich contextual quality. They include not just what happened, but where and when it happened, who was there, and how you felt. Episodic memories are often vivid and detailed, especially when they involve emotionally significant events. Interestingly, episodic memory appears to be uniquely human, or at least rare in the animal kingdom. While many animals can remember specific events for short periods, the ability to consciously recollect and reflect on past personal experiences may be one of the defining features of human consciousness. This type of memory is also particularly vulnerable to aging and certain neurological conditions like Alzheimer's disease, where people gradually lose the ability to form new episodic memories, while older, well-established memories may persist longer. Semantic memory, in contrast, is your memory for general knowledge and facts about the world. It's knowing that Paris is the capital of France, that water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, that dogs are mammals, and what the word nostalgia means. Unlike episodic memory, semantic memory doesn't include contextual details about when or where you learn the information. You know these facts, but you probably don't remember the specific moment you learned them. Semantic memory accumulates gradually over your lifetime, building a vast knowledge base that you draw upon constantly in daily life. This type of memory tends to be more robust than episodic memory, both in terms of retention over time and resistance to brain damage. Even individuals with severe amnesia who can't form new episodic memories can often still acquire new semantic knowledge, though the process may be slower and require more repetition. The second major category of long-term memory is implicit memory, also called non-declarative memory. This type of memory operates without conscious awareness. You're not deliberately trying to remember something, and you may not even be aware that memory is guiding your behavior. Yet, implicit memory influences your actions, perceptions, and feelings in profound ways. Procedural memory, which we touched on earlier, is one form of implicit memory. It's your memory for skills and habits, for how to do things. Beyond motor skills like riding a bike or playing an instrument, procedural memory also includes cognitive skills like reading, speaking a language fluently, and recognizing patterns. These skills become automatic through practice, operating smoothly without requiring conscious thought about the individual steps involved. Another form of implicit memory is priming, where exposure to one stimulus influences your response to a subsequent stimulus. If you're shown the word yellow, you'll recognize the word banana slightly faster than if you'd been shown an unrelated word first. This happens outside conscious awareness. You don't realize you've been primed, yet the effect is measurable and reliable. Priming effects can last from seconds to days and demonstrate how previous experiences shape current perceptions and behaviors in ways you never notice. Classical conditioning is another type of implicit memory. If you've ever felt your mouth water at the smell of your favorite food cooking, or felt a wave of anxiety when hearing a song that was playing during a stressful period of your life, you've experienced the effects of classical conditioning. Through repeated pairings, your brain learns associations between stimuli, creating automatic responses that don't require conscious thought. The distinction between explicit and implicit memory is not just academic. It helps explain fascinating phenomena, like people with amnesia who can learn new skills even though they can't remember the learning sessions, or how advertising can influence preferences without viewers consciously remembering the ads. It also shows that remembering encompasses far more than conscious recollection. Much of what you've learned and retained operates silently, shaping your behavior from beneath the surface of awareness. Understanding these different memory systems reveals memory not as a single thing, but as a symphony of processes, each playing its part in creating the rich tapestry of human experience. As you drift tonight, these systems continue their work, processing, consolidating, integrating, preparing you for tomorrow, while preserving the essence of yesterday. How memories form. The journey from experience to memory is neither instantaneous nor guaranteed. Every moment of every day, your senses collect far more information than you could possibly store. Most of it vanishes immediately, never making it past that brief flicker of sensory memory. But some experiences, through a combination of attention, emotion, and repetition, begin the transformation into lasting memories. This transformation happens in stages, each crucial to whether a memory will endure or fade like writing in sand. The first stage is encoding, the process of converting sensory input into a form your brain can store. Encoding doesn't happen passively. It requires attention. You cannot remember what you never properly encoded in the first place, which explains why you sometimes can't find your keys or phone. You weren't paying attention when you set them down, so your brain never encoded the location. This is also why trying to remember while distracted is so difficult. Divided attention leads to shallow encoding, creating weak memory traces that fade quickly. The depth of encoding matters enormously. Simply reading words will create a weaker memory than thinking about their meaning. This principle, called the levels of processing theory, suggests that the more deeply you process information, the better you'll remember it. Shallow processing focuses on surface features like how a word sounds or looks. Deep processing involves thinking about meaning, making connections to existing knowledge, or considering personal relevance. Students who read their textbooks while thinking critically about the material and relating it to their own experiences remember far more than those who simply read the words. The method of loci, an ancient memory technique, still used by memory champions today, works by leveraging deep, meaningful encoding. You imagine a familiar location, like your home, and place items you want to remember at specific spots along a mental path through that location. When you need to recall the list, you mentally walk through your home, encountering each item where you placed it. This works because it transforms abstract information into vivid mental images connected to well-known spatial information, creating multiple retrieval paths and richer encoding. Elaborative rehearsal is another powerful encoding strategy. Instead of simply repeating information mechanically, you elaborate on it, adding details, making connections, asking questions about it. If you're trying to remember someone's name, you might think about what the name means, whether you know others with that name, or create a vivid mental image connecting their face to their name. This additional processing creates a more robust memory trace with multiple associations, making retrieval easier later. The spacing effect demonstrates that how you distribute your learning over time dramatically affects memory. Cramming all your studying into one long session is far less effective than spreading that same amount of study time across multiple sessions, separated by hours or days. Each time you retrieve information from memory, you strengthen the memory trace. Spacing creates more opportunities for retrieval practice, and the slight difficulty of retrieving something you haven't thought about in a while actually strengthens the memory more than easy, immediate repetition. This might seem counterintuitive. Surely practicing something while it's fresh in your mind would work better than waiting until you've started to forget. But research consistently shows the opposite. The very act of effortful retrieval, of pulling information back into consciousness when it started to fade, is what cements it into long-term memory. This is why testing yourself is such an effective study technique, often more effective than simply reviewing the material again. Once information is encoded, it enters a fragile state where it's vulnerable to disruption. This is where consolidation comes in, the process of stabilizing a memory trace over time. Consolidation happens in two phases. Cellular consolidation occurs over the first few hours after learning and involves changes at the level of individual synapses. Systems consolidation unfolds over weeks, months, or even years, gradually transferring memories from the hippocampus to the neocortex for more permanent storage. Sleep plays an absolutely critical role in memory consolidation. During sleep, particularly during slow-wave sleep and REM sleep, your brain replays neural patterns from the day's experiences. This replay strengthens the connections between neurons that were active during those experiences, effectively practicing and reinforcing new memories. Research shows that people who sleep after learning remember more than people who stay awake, even when the total time between learning and testing is the same. Different stages of sleep appear to support different aspects of memory consolidation. Research suggests that slow-wave sleep, the deepest stage of non-REM sleep, plays an important role in consolidating declarative memories, the facts and events you can consciously recall. During slow-wave sleep, the brain appears to replay neural patterns from the day's experiences, strengthening connections and gradually transferring memories from the hippocampus to the neocortex for more permanent storage. REM sleep, when most vivid dreaming occurs, has been particularly linked to procedural memories and may also play a role in emotional memory processing, though the exact contributions of each sleep stage continue to be studied. What seems clear is that both sleep stages work together in complementary ways to support overall consolidation. This is why a good night's sleep, after learning something new, isn't just restful. It's essential for transforming that learning into lasting memory. The consolidation process can be disrupted by interference from new learning, by trauma such as a concussion, or by substances that affect brain chemistry. This is why head injuries can result in retrograde amnesia, loss of memories from the period before the injury. The memories that were still being consolidated hadn't yet become stable, and the injury disrupted that process. Older, fully consolidated memories are typically spared because they no longer rely on the fragile processes that new memories require. Emotion powerfully enhances memory consolidation. When something triggers strong emotion, your amygdala activates and signals other brain regions that this experience is important. This triggers the release of stress hormones like cortisol and epinephrine, which act on the amygdala and hippocampus to strengthen consolidation. This is adaptive. Emotionally significant events, whether positive or negative, are often events you need to remember for your survival and well-being. However, while emotion strengthens memory overall, it doesn't necessarily increase accuracy. Emotional arousal tends to focus attention and memory on the central aspects of an experience, while actually impairing memory for peripheral details. If you witnessed a robbery, you might vividly remember the gun, but have poor memory for what the robber was wearing or what else was happening in the room. Your brain prioritizes what seems most important in the moment, which isn't always what you later wish you'd remembered. The consolidation window also creates opportunities for memory enhancement through deliberate intervention. Studies have shown that reviewing information shortly before sleep improves retention, likely because the memory is fresh when consolidation processes begin during sleep. Similarly, certain forms of stimulation, whether through continued practice, emotional arousal, or even in some experimental settings through direct brain stimulation, can enhance consolidation if applied during this critical window. What's particularly fascinating is that consolidation isn't a one-time event. Every time you retrieve a memory, it enters a reconsolidation process. The memory becomes temporarily unstable again, and it must be reconsolidated to persist. This creates both opportunities and vulnerabilities. On one hand, reconsolidation allows memories to be updated with new information, keeping them relevant and accurate. On the other hand, it means memories can be altered or weakened during retrieval. Therapeutic approaches for PTSD have explored using this reconsolidation window to modify traumatic memories, making them less distressing when retrieved in the future. The formation of memory is not a single moment, but an extended process, a delicate transformation from fleeting experience to enduring trace. It requires attention, benefits from emotion, depends on sleep, and remains malleable long after the original experience is past. As you rest tonight, your brain continues this ancient work, sifting through the day's experiences, deciding what to keep, strengthening some connections while allowing others to fade, preparing the ground for tomorrow's memories, even as it preserves echoes of yesterday. The fragility of memory. For all its remarkable capabilities, memory is far more fragile and fallible than most people realize. We tend to think of our memories as accurate records, like photographs in an album or videos we can replay. But the truth is far stranger and more unsettling. Every memory you possess is a reconstruction, assembled on the fly from scattered traces, influenced by your current beliefs, knowledge, and expectations. And sometimes, quite convincingly, you can remember things that never happened at all. False memories are not rare anomalies. They're a natural consequence of how memory works. In the 1990s, memory researcher Elizabeth Loftus conducted a series of groundbreaking studies demonstrating just how easy it is to implant false memories in people's minds. In one famous experiment, she convinced roughly 25% of participants that they had been lost in a shopping mall as a child, a completely fabricated event. She did this simply by having a trusted family member describe the fictitious event and then asking participants to try to remember it over several sessions. Participants didn't just agree that it had happened. They began to remember details, describing what the mole looked like, how they felt, who found them. These weren't lies. The participants genuinely believed these false memories were real. This happens because memory is constructive. When you try to remember something, your brain doesn't retrieve a perfect recording. It pieces together information from various sources. Actual memory traces, general knowledge about how such events usually unfold, details from similar experiences, and suggestions from external sources. Your brain seamlessly weaves these different threads together into a coherent narrative that feels like a unified memory. You cannot tell, from the inside, which parts are accurate and which are reconstructed or even wholly fabricated. The misinformation effect demonstrates how easily external information can contaminate memory. If you witness an event and then someone describes that event to you with subtle inaccuracies, those inaccuracies can become incorporated into your own memory. In classic experiments, participants watched videos of car accidents. Later, some were asked, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? While others were asked, how fast were the cars going when they hit each other? The word smashed led participants to estimate higher speeds and, a week later, to falsely remember seeing broken glass in the video, even though there was none. A single word changed their memories. This has profound implications for eyewitness testimony in legal settings. Eyewitnesses often testify with great confidence, describing events in vivid detail. Juries tend to find confident eyewitness testimony very persuasive. But research shows that confidence and accuracy are only weakly correlated when it comes to memory. You can be completely certain about a memory and completely wrong. Factors like stress, the presence of a weapon, cross-racial identification, and suggestive questioning can all severely compromise the accuracy of eyewitness memory. Yet the witness may feel absolutely certain of what they remember. Leading questions are particularly problematic. When questioned after an event, people are suggestible. An interviewer who asks, "Did you see the broken headlight?" rather than, "Did you see a broken headlight?" subtly suggests that there was indeed a broken headlight. The witness may then incorporate this suggestion into their memory, later genuinely believing they saw it. This is not intentional deception. The memory feels real because, to the person experiencing it, it is real. Their brain has reconstructed the memory, incorporating the suggested information. Children are especially vulnerable to suggestion, which has tragic implications for cases involving child witnesses. Young children have more difficulty distinguishing between what they experienced and what they were told about or imagined. Repeated, suggestive questioning can lead children to develop false memories of events that never occurred. This is not to say children always give unreliable testimony, but it underscores the importance of proper interviewing techniques that minimize suggestion and leading questions. Source monitoring errors represent another way memory goes astray. Sometimes you remember a piece of information, but misremember where it came from. You might remember a fact, but forget whether you read it in a news article, heard it from a friend, or saw it in a movie. In some cases, you might remember something you merely imagined or dreamed as if it were a real experience. This blurring between sources happens because memory stores content more reliably than context. Cryptomnesia is a specific type of source monitoring error where you remember information but forget that you learned it from someone else, leading you to believe it's your own original idea. Many cases of unintentional plagiarism likely stem from cryptomnesia. Someone reads an idea years earlier, forgets the source, and later produces that idea thinking it originated with them. The memory is real, but the attribution is wrong. Schemas, your mental frameworks for understanding the world, also shape and sometimes distort memory. You have schemas for all sorts of things: what typically happens at a restaurant, what a bedroom usually contains, how stories unfold. When you encode and retrieve memories, these schemas fill in gaps, adding typical details that may or may not have been present. If asked to remember a visit to a dentist's office, you might remember seeing a receptionist's desk, even if you never actually noticed it, simply because your schema for dentist offices includes a receptionist's desk. Confabulation is perhaps the most striking demonstration of memory's constructive nature. In confabulation, people produce detailed memories of events without any intention to deceive, despite those events never occurring. This is most commonly seen in certain neurological conditions, but healthy people can confabulate as well under certain circumstances. The person genuinely believes the fabricated memory. They're not lying. Their brain is simply filling gaps with plausible information, creating a coherent narrative, even when accurate memories aren't available. Childhood amnesia, the inability of adults to remember events from early childhood, particularly before age 3 or 4, demonstrates another limitation of memory. You have no conscious memories from infancy, despite experiencing countless events during that time. This isn't because those experiences weren't important or because you weren't paying attention. It likely relates to the immaturity of the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex in early life, as well as developments in language and sense of self that occur around age 3 or 4. Before these developments, the encoding and consolidation processes necessary for long-term episodic memory simply aren't yet fully online. Interestingly, even though you don't consciously remember your earliest years, those experiences still shape you. Implicit memory forms much earlier than explicit memory. Emotional responses, conditioned associations, and procedural learning can all occur in infancy and persist into adulthood, influencing behavior without conscious recollection of their origin. Transience, the gradual fading of memories over time, is so universal that it barely seems like a flaw, more a basic feature of how memory works. Most memories fade, the details blur. What once felt vivid and clear becomes vague and uncertain. This isn't necessarily bad. If you remembered every trivial detail of every day, your memory would be cluttered with irrelevant information. Forgetting helps you prioritize, keeping the important and useful while clearing away the mundane. However, transience also affects memories you'd prefer to keep. Names slip away. Important details blur. Events you once could describe vividly become hazy outlines. This happens because memory traces naturally decay over time without rehearsal, and because new learning creates interference, making older memories harder to retrieve. The memories don't necessarily disappear completely. They may still exist in weakened form, potentially recoverable with the right cues, but they're no longer readily accessible. Blocking is that frustrating experience of knowing you know something, but being unable to retrieve it in the moment. The tip of the tongue phenomenon is the classic example. You know the word. You might even know what letter it starts with, or how many syllables it has, but you can't quite access it. The memory is there, but the retrieval pathway is temporarily blocked, often by similar competing information. The harder you try to force it, often the more elusive it becomes. Then later, when you're thinking about something else entirely, it suddenly pops into consciousness. The fragility of memory is humbling. It challenges our intuition that we have direct, accurate access to our past. But this fragility also reveals something profound. Memory is not about perfect preservation. It's about meaning making, about constructing a coherent narrative of self that guides present behavior and future planning. Your memories, accurate or not, are still the foundation of your identity, the story you tell yourself about who you are and how you came to be. And in that story, emotional truth sometimes matters more than factual precision. Exceptional memory phenomena. While most people share roughly similar memory capabilities, some individuals possess memory abilities so extraordinary they seem almost superhuman. These exceptional cases reveal the outer boundaries of what human memory can achieve and provide clues about how memory works in all of us. Perhaps no memory ability captures imagination quite like photographic memory, more properly called eidetic memory. This is the supposed ability to recall images with extreme precision, as if you could look at a photograph, close your eyes, and still see it in perfect detail. True eidetic memory is exceedingly rare and primarily documented in children. Studies estimate that perhaps 2 to 10% of children display eidetic imagery, but this ability typically fades with age, becoming virtually non-existent in adults. Even in children who demonstrate eidetic memory, the ability isn't quite as remarkable as popular culture suggests. These children can indeed recall visual images in striking detail for a few minutes after viewing them, describing elements as if they're still looking at the picture. But the image fades relatively quickly, typically within minutes, and isn't truly photographic. It can be distorted by subsequent information, and it doesn't extend to all sensory modalities or all types of information. The adult savants and memory champions sometimes claim to have photographic memory, don't actually possess eidetic imagery in the technical sense. Instead, they use elaborate mnemonic techniques, have exceptional working memory capacity, or show unusual neural organization related to specific types of information. Their abilities are real and remarkable, but they're not actually viewing mental photographs. Hyperthymesia, also called highly superior autobiographical memory, is a condition where individuals can recall events from their personal lives with extraordinary detail and accuracy. The first documented case was Jill Price, who in 2006 described to researchers how she could remember nearly every day of her life since adolescence with exceptional clarity. Asked what happened on a random date years or decades in the past, she could describe what day of the week it was, what she did, what was in the news. With accuracy researchers could verify. This might sound like a blessing, but many individuals with hyperthymesia report it as burdensome. The constant flood of memories can be overwhelming and distracting. Unlike most people who remember the general outline of events and forget most details, these individuals remember in exhaustive detail. They can't choose what to remember or forget. Every trivial moment, every minor embarrassment, every painful experience remains vivid and accessible. Jill Price described her memory as a running movie that never stops. Brain scans of people with hyperthymesia show differences in several regions, including the caudate nucleus and temporal lobe structures involved in autobiographical memory. It's not entirely clear what causes hyperthymesia, whether it's a difference in encoding, consolidation, or retrieval, or perhaps an inability to forget normally. Researchers continue studying these rare individuals, hoping to understand both their exceptional abilities and what it reveals about typical memory. Savant syndrome presents another fascinating memory phenomenon. Some individuals, often with developmental disabilities or autism, display extraordinary abilities in narrow domains, despite significant challenges in other areas. Among savant abilities, calendar calculation is particularly notable. Some savants can instantly tell you what day of the week any date fell on, even dates hundreds of years in the past or future. Others can memorize and recall vast amounts of information, such as phone books, or recall complex visual details after a single brief viewing. The mechanisms behind savant abilities aren't fully understood. Some theories suggest that reduced connectivity between brain regions allows for more focused, detailed processing of specific types of information. Others propose that savants may process information differently, relying more on rote memorization and pattern recognition than on semantic understanding. What's clear is that these abilities demonstrate the brain's capacity for extreme specialization and highlight that intelligence and memory are not single, unified traits, but collections of different capabilities that can vary independently. Memory athletes, participants in memory competitions, demonstrate what dedicated practice and sophisticated techniques can achieve. These individuals memorize decks of cards in under a minute, lengthy sequences of random digits, or complex strings of words and images. They don't have different brains than everyone else. Brain imaging studies show they use the same memory systems as anyone else. Their advantage comes from extensive training with specific mnemonic strategies, particularly the method of Loci described earlier. What makes memory champions remarkable isn't innate ability, but disciplined practice with effective techniques combined with intense focus and motivation. Studies have shown that ordinary people, given training in the same methods memory athletes use, can dramatically improve their memory performance. This suggests that much of typical memory ability is actually habit and technique. Most people have never learned or practiced effective encoding strategies, so their memory feels fixed and limited. But with the right approaches, nearly anyone can remember far more than they currently do. Synesthesia, a condition where stimulation of one sensory pathway leads to automatic experiences in another, can sometimes enhance memory. Individuals with grapheme color synesthesia, for instance, consistently see specific colors when they see letters or numbers. Someone with this form of synesthesia might always see the letter A as red and the number 5 as blue. This additional sensory dimension provides extra cues for memory, essentially giving these individuals more information to encode and more pathways for retrieval. Some famous mnemonists, including Solomon Cheryshev, studied extensively by Russian psychologist Alexander Luria, had synesthesia. Cheryshev could remember extraordinary amounts of information, including complex mathematical formulas, long strings of nonsense syllables, and poems in languages he didn't understand. Luria tested him over 30 years and found virtually no limit to his capacity. Cheryshev described experiencing numbers and words as colors, textures, sounds, and tastes, creating a rich, multi-sensory experience that made forgetting nearly impossible. However, Cheryshev remarkable memory came with costs. The flood of sensory associations made it difficult for him to think abstractly. Every word evoked such rich imagery that following conversations or reading simple prose became challenging. Metaphors confused him. He struggled to recognize faces because they appeared different depending on the angle, lighting, or expression. His case illustrates that optimal memory isn't simply maximal memory. The ability to forget, to abstract, to generalize, and to see similarities despite superficial differences. All these are crucial cognitive abilities that require letting go of some details. These exceptional cases, whether from unusual neurology or dedicated training, reveal that memory is far more flexible and capable than everyday experience suggests. They show that the constraints we typically experience reflect not the limits of what's possible, but the particular ways our brains have been shaped by development, experience, and practice. and they remind us that memory, like any ability, exists on a spectrum. We each have our own unique patterns of strengths and weaknesses, and with understanding and effort, we can often shift our own position on that spectrum. Memory across the lifespan. Memory changes dramatically across the human lifespan, from the rapidly developing brain of infancy through childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and into old age. Understanding these changes reveals how memory interacts with other cognitive developments and shows that memory is not a fixed capacity, but a dynamic system that evolves throughout life. Infants are born with remarkably capable memory systems, though these systems operate differently than adult memory. Even newborns can recognize their mother's voice, a learned preference that develops in the womb during the final months of pregnancy. Young infants can form associations, showing recognition of faces, sounds, and objects they've encountered before. However, these early memories are largely implicit. Babies remember through behavioral changes, conditioned responses, and habituation, not through conscious recollection. By 6 months, infants show clear evidence of recall memory. They can imitate actions they saw performed a day earlier, demonstrating that they've stored and can retrieve a representation of those actions. But infantile amnesia, the phenomenon discussed earlier, means that despite all this learning, virtually none of these early experiences will be consciously accessible in later life. The brain structures necessary for forming lasting episodic memories simply haven't matured enough. Early childhood sees explosive memory development. Between ages 3 and 6, children begin forming memories they'll carry into adulthood. Language development plays a crucial role here. As children acquire language, they gain tools for organizing experiences, creating narratives, and rehearsing memories through storytelling. The emergence of an autobiographical self, an understanding of oneself as a continuous person existing across time, also supports episodic memory formation. Working memory capacity increases steadily throughout childhood and adolescence. Young children can hold less information in mind than older children and adults, which affects everything from following instructions to solving complex problems. A 4-year-old might remember 1 or 2 items, while a 7-year-old can handle 3 or 4, approaching adult capacity around adolescence. This development depends partly on brain maturation, particularly of the prefrontal cortex, and partly on learning strategies like rehearsal and chunking. Adolescence brings particular changes to memory and cognition. The teenage brain undergoes significant restructuring, with synaptic pruning eliminating unused connections while strengthening frequently used pathways. The prefrontal cortex, crucial for executive functions including working memory, continues maturing well into the 20s. This extended development helps explain why teenagers sometimes make impulsive decisions and struggle with complex planning, despite having strong basic cognitive abilities. Interestingly, many people experience what's called the reminiscence bump, a tendency to have more vivid and numerous autobiographical memories from adolescence and early adulthood than from other periods of life. When older adults are asked to recall memories from across their lives, they disproportionately recall events from roughly ages 10 to 30. Several factors likely contribute to this. Adolescence and early adulthood involve many significant firsts, novel experiences that receive enhanced encoding. These years also involve identity formation, so events may be more deeply processed and frequently rehearsed as people construct their life narratives. Young and middle adulthood represent the peak of memory abilities for most people. Working memory capacity, processing speed, and the ability to form new long-term memories are all generally strongest in the 20s and 30s. However, this doesn't mean memory is uniform across adulthood. Expertise matters enormously. A 60-year-old chess master will have vastly superior memory for chess positions than a 20-year-old novice, despite the novice having better general memory capacity. Knowledge, experience, and practice strategies often compensate for, or even overcome, age-related changes in basic cognitive abilities. As people move into their 50s and beyond, some memory changes become common, though the timing and extent vary considerably between individuals. Older adults often report more difficulty with memory, particularly for names, recent events, and where they placed objects. However, research suggests these complaints sometimes exceed actual memory declines, as measured by objective tests. Older adults may hold themselves to higher standards, or be more aware of memory failures that younger people also experience, but attribute to stress or distraction rather than aging. The cognitive aging that does occur affects some memory systems more than others. Working memory, processing speed, and the ability to encode new episodic memories all tend to decline gradually beginning around age 60 or 70. However, semantic memory, your store of general knowledge, typically remains stable or even continues growing. Procedural memory for skills also holds up well. An 80-year-old may struggle to remember what they had for breakfast, but can still ride a bike, play an instrument they learned decades ago, or speak a language fluently. Several factors influence the rate and extent of cognitive aging. Physical exercise, particularly aerobic exercise, appears to protect against memory decline and may even improve memory in older adults. Exercise increases blood flow to the brain, promotes neurogenesis in the hippocampus, and supports the health of existing neurons. Mental stimulation, social engagement, managing cardiovascular risk factors, and getting adequate sleep all contribute to cognitive health in aging. The concept of cognitive reserve helps explain why some people show less cognitive decline than others despite similar brain changes. Cognitive reserve refers to the brain's ability to improvise and find alternative ways to accomplish tasks when the usual neural pathways are damaged or degraded. People with higher cognitive reserve, typically those with more education, mentally demanding occupations, and continued intellectual engagement, can maintain cognitive function longer, even as their brains show aging-related changes. It's as if they have more backup routes available when the main roads become congested. Not all memory changes with aging are declines. Older adults often show enhanced emotional regulation, remembering positive information more than negative, a pattern sometimes called the positivity effect. They may be better at seeing the big picture and making judgments based on accumulated wisdom, rather than getting caught up in irrelevant details. While they may process information more slowly, the quality of their thinking can remain high, or even improve in domains where experience matters. Pathological memory decline, as seen in Alzheimer's disease and other dementias, is not a normal part of aging. While some gradual slowing is common, severe memory impairment that interferes with daily life, particularly the inability to form new memories or profound forgetting of significant personal information, signals a disease process rather than typical aging. Distinguishing normal age-related changes from early dementia is crucial for getting appropriate medical care. Across the lifespan, memory is neither static nor solely declining. It develops, peaks, shifts in its patterns of strengths and weaknesses, and can be supported and protected through lifestyle choices. The mind you have at 70 is not the same as the mind you had at 20, but different doesn't necessarily mean worse. It means changed, adapted, carrying decades of accumulated knowledge and wisdom, even as some processing capabilities shift. Throughout life, Memory remains central to who we are, connecting past, present, and future into a continuous sense of self. Memory and emotion. Emotion and memory are intricately intertwined. Your most vivid memories are almost always emotionally charged, and your emotional state influences what you encode, how you consolidate, and what you later retrieve. This relationship between emotion and memory is so fundamental that understanding memory without considering emotion would miss something essential about how human memory actually works. The amygdala, your brain's emotional processing center, enhances memory for emotionally arousing events. When you experience something that triggers strong emotion, whether fear, joy, anger, or excitement, your amygdala activates and modulates activity in the hippocampus and other memory regions. This modulation strengthens encoding and consolidation, essentially telling your memory systems that this experience is important and deserves to be remembered. This emotional enhancement of memory serves an obvious evolutionary purpose. Remembering dangerous situations, sources of food, locations of safe shelter. These memories could mean the difference between survival and death for your ancestors. Even today, enhanced memory for emotional events helps you learn from experience, avoid repeating mistakes, and seek out positive experiences. The emotions tag memories with significance, creating a prioritization system for what deserves precious neural resources. However, emotional enhancement isn't uniform across all aspects of an experience. Emotion tends to focus attention and memory on the central, emotionally salient features, while actually impairing memory for peripheral details. This is sometimes called the weapon focus effect in the context of witnessing crimes. If someone threatens you with a weapon, you'll likely remember the weapon in vivid detail, but have poor memory for other aspects of the person or situation. Your attention narrows to the threat, and memory follows attention. Flashbulb memories are vivid, detailed memories of learning about shocking or emotionally significant events. Many people can describe exactly where they were, what they were doing, and how they learned about events like the September 11th attacks, the Kennedy assassination, or other momentous occasions. These memories feel qualitatively different from ordinary memories, more vivid, more detailed, more certain. The term flashbulb suggests a photograph, a perfect preserved moment. However, research shows that flashbulb memories, despite their vividness and the confidence people have in them, are not actually more accurate than other memories. They're subject to the same reconstructive processes and susceptible to the same errors. Studies that assess people's flashbulb memories soon after events, and then again months or years later, consistently find that the memories change over time, with details being forgotten, altered, or replaced. But confidence in these memories remains high, creating a striking dissociation between subjective vividness and objective accuracy. The emotional state you're in when you try to remember something can also influence what you recall. Mood-congruent memory refers to the tendency to remember information that matches your current mood. When you're happy, you more easily recall happy memories. When you're sad, sad memories come to mind more readily. This isn't just about what you choose to think about. The emotional state actually influences accessibility, making mood-congruent information easier to retrieve from memory. This has important implications for depression. Depressed individuals often struggle with pervasive negative thoughts and memories. The depression creates a negative mood state, which makes negative memories more accessible, which reinforces the negative mood, creating a vicious cycle. Therapeutic interventions often aim to break this cycle, helping people access positive memories and information even when their mood is low. State-dependent memory describes a related phenomenon where memory is better when your internal state at retrieval matches your state at encoding. Information learned while drunk is sometimes better recalled when drunk again than when sober, an unsettling finding from research on alcohol and memory. This extends beyond substances to physiological states. You may be better at remembering information from a test if you're in a similar state of arousal during study and test. Context-dependent memory shows that external environmental cues also affect retrieval. Information is generally easier to remember in the same environment where it was learned. In a famous study, divers learned information either underwater or on land, and then were tested in either the same or different environment. Memory was best when the learning and testing environments matched. The environmental cues present during encoding become associated with the memory and can serve as retrieval cues later. Traumatic memories represent a special case of emotional memory. Trauma can create memories that are both intensely vivid for certain elements and fragmented or incomplete for others. People with PTSD often experience intrusive memories, vivid sensory fragments of traumatic events that intrude into consciousness unbidden, triggered by reminders of the trauma. These memories can feel overwhelming and inescapable, dominating awareness and causing significant distress. Interestingly, while the sensory and emotional aspects of traumatic memories can be vivid, the narrative context may be impaired. People may remember how they felt, and sensory details like sights, sounds, and smells, but struggle to construct a coherent temporal sequence or accurately identify details like who was present or exactly what was said. This fragmentation may relate to how extreme stress affects different memory systems, enhancing some aspects of memory while impairing others. The relationship between trauma and memory is complex and sometimes controversial. While some individuals have clear, intrusive memories of trauma, others may not think about traumatic events for years, only to have memories surface later. The existence and nature of repressed memories, memories of trauma that are completely inaccessible for periods and then recovered, remains debated. Some researchers believe repression is a real defense mechanism. Others argue that most recovered memories are actually false memories created through suggestive therapy practices. What's clear is that memory doesn't work like a video recorder that can be paused and then played back perfectly. Traumatic memories, like all memories, are reconstructed, subject to distortion, and influenced by post-event information. This doesn't mean people who report traumatic memories are necessarily wrong, but it does mean that even genuine memories of real events may include inaccuracies, and distinguishing real from false memories, especially years after events, can be extraordinarily difficult. Positive emotions also enhance memory, though often in different ways than negative emotions. Joy, humor, and surprise can all boost encoding and retrieval. Information presented in a humorous context is often remembered better than the same information presented neutrally. Surprise triggers attention and enhances encoding, which is why unexpected plot twists in stories are so memorable. The relationship between emotion and memory shapes not just what you remember, but who you are. Your emotional memories, the joys and sorrows, the triumphs and failures, the loves and losses, these form the emotional core of your life story. They guide your decisions, inform your relationships, and color your expectations about the future. Memory without emotion would be a catalog of facts. Emotion gives memory meaning, depth, and personal significance. When memory fails, while everyday forgetting is normal and even useful, certain conditions can cause severe memory impairments that dramatically affect daily life. Understanding these conditions illuminates both how fragile memory can be and how dependent we are on our memories for basic functioning. Amnesia, severe memory loss beyond normal forgetting, comes in several forms. Retrograde amnesia involves loss of memories from before the event that caused the amnesia, such as a head injury or stroke. The extent of retrograde amnesia varies. Some people lose only minutes or hours before the injury. Others lose months or years. Typically, older memories are more resistant than recent ones, a pattern called Ribot's Law. You might forget what happened yesterday, but remember your childhood clearly. Anterograde amnesia is the inability to form new, long-term memories after the onset of amnesia. This is what patient HM experienced after his hippocampus was removed. People with anterograde amnesia can usually carry on a conversation normally, using their working memory. But once the conversation ends and their attention shifts, they won't remember it happened. They live in an eternal present, unable to move forward in time mentally, even as they move forward physically. Transient global amnesia is a temporary form of amnesia where people suddenly lose the ability to form new memories and often can't recall recent events, but the condition resolves within 24 hours, usually much sooner. During an episode, individuals are confused and often repeatedly ask the same questions, unable to remember the answers. The cause isn't fully understood, though it may involve temporary disruption of blood flow to memory critical brain regions. While alarming, transient global amnesia typically doesn't recur and doesn't indicate underlying serious pathology. Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia, affecting millions worldwide. It begins with mild memory difficulties, often first noticed as trouble remembering recent events or conversations. As the disease progresses, memory impairment worsens. People forget important dates, struggle to recognize family members, get lost in familiar places, and gradually lose the ability to care for themselves. Ultimately, Alzheimer's destroys not just memory, but personality, judgment, and basic cognitive functions. The disease involves the accumulation of abnormal protein deposits in the brain, including amyloid plaques and tau tangles, which damage and kill neurons, particularly in the hippocampus and cortex. Brain tissue literally shrinks as neurons die. While age is the greatest risk factor, Alzheimer's is not a normal part of aging. It's a disease process, and researchers continue searching for treatments that can slow or prevent it. Vascular dementia, the second most common form of dementia, results from reduced blood flow to the brain, often from strokes or chronic small vessel disease. Memory impairment in vascular dementia may occur suddenly after a stroke or develop gradually as small, unnoticed strokes accumulate. The pattern of cognitive deficits depends on which brain regions are affected by reduced blood flow. Managing cardiovascular risk factors like hypertension, diabetes, and high cholesterol can reduce the risk of vascular dementia. Frontotemporal dementia primarily affects the frontal and temporal lobes, regions involved in behavior, emotion, and language. While Alzheimer's typically begins with memory problems, frontotemporal dementia often presents first with personality changes, loss of empathy, impulsivity, or language difficulties. Memory may be relatively preserved in early stages, though it typically declines as the disease progresses. Korsakoff-Dust syndrome, usually caused by severe thiamine deficiency related to chronic alcoholism, causes profound anterograde amnesia, along with some retrograde amnesia. People with Korsakoff's can't form new memories and often confabulate, unconsciously fabricating information to fill memory gaps. Unlike Alzheimer's, Korsakoff's syndrome can sometimes stabilize if thiamine treatment begins early enough, though recovery of lost function is usually limited. Concussions and traumatic brain injuries can cause temporary or permanent memory problems depending on severity. Even mild concussions often result in a brief period of amnesia around the time of the injury. More severe injuries can cause lasting memory impairments, particularly affecting the ability to form new episodic memories. Repeated concussions, as sometimes seen in contact sports, raise particular concern as effects may be cumulative. Seizures, particularly those involving the temporal lobes where the hippocampus resides, can impair memory. During a seizure, memory encoding is disrupted. People typically can't remember what happened during the seizure itself and may have amnesia for the period immediately before and after. Chronic epilepsy can sometimes lead to more lasting memory difficulties, particularly if seizures are frequent or poorly controlled. Certain medications can impair memory, most notably benzodiazepines, which are often prescribed for anxiety or sleep. These medications can interfere with the formation of new memories, a side effect that's sometimes intentionally used in medical settings to prevent traumatic memories from forming. Long-term use may be associated with more persistent memory difficulties, though this remains somewhat controversial. Chronic stress and depression can both significantly impair memory function. Chronic stress elevates cortisol, which in high levels can damage the hippocampus and interfere with memory formation. Depression affects attention and motivation, which indirectly impairs memory encoding. Depressed individuals often complain of poor memory, and while some of this reflects true impairment, particularly in working memory and episodic memory for recent events, some may reflect decreased attention or motivation rather than a fundamental memory deficit. Sleep deprivation impairs memory both during encoding and consolidation. When you're sleep deprived, attention suffers, making it harder to encode information effectively. Sleep deprivation also prevents the consolidation that normally occurs during sleep. Chronic insufficient sleep may have cumulative effects on memory and cognition, potentially even increasing risk of dementia later in life. Substance use can impair memory acutely and chronically. Alcohol intoxication interferes with memory formation, which is why people may have limited or no memory of events that occurred while they were drunk, a phenomenon called a blackout. Chronic heavy alcohol use can cause lasting brain damage, affecting memory. Marijuana also impairs memory during acute intoxication, particularly short-term and working memory. Long-term effects of chronic use remain debated, but likely depend on dose, frequency, and age of use. These various conditions and factors that impair memory underscore how dependent normal cognitive function is on the healthy operation of specific brain regions and systems. When these systems fail, the effects ripple through all aspects of life. Memory isn't just one function among many. It's fundamental to learning, to maintaining relationships, to making plans, to having a coherent sense of self, extending across time. Its loss diminishes not just the ability to remember, but the full richness of human experience. Improving and protecting memory. While memory naturally changes with age and can be impaired by various conditions, there's much you can do to optimize memory function. Understanding how memory works allows you to employ strategies that work with your brain's natural processes rather than against them. The most fundamental strategy for improving memory is to ensure effective encoding in the first place. Pay attention. This sounds obvious, but countless memory failures result from divided attention or insufficient focus at the moment of encoding. When you're introduced to someone, actually focus on their name. Look at them, repeat the name, use it in conversation immediately. When you set down your keys, notice where you're putting them. Mindfulness, the practice of being fully present and aware, directly supports better memory by improving attention. Elaborative encoding creates richer, more detailed memory traces with more retrieval paths. Instead of simply reading information, think about what it means. Make connections to what you already know. Generate examples. Form visual images. Ask questions about it. The more deeply you process information, the better you'll remember it. Students who approach studying this way, actively engaging with material rather than passively reading, consistently outperform those who rely on rote repetition. The testing effect demonstrates that actively retrieving information from memory strengthens that memory more than simply reviewing it. Practice testing yourself. After reading a section in a book, close it and try to summarize what you just read. Use flashcards. Take practice tests. Make the effort to pull information from memory. This retrieval practice not only reveals what you don't know, allowing you to focus your studying more effectively, but the act of retrieval itself strengthens the memory. Spaced repetition leverages the spacing effect discussed earlier. Instead of cramming, distribute your study over time. Review information shortly after first learning it, then again after a longer interval, then after an even longer interval. The spacing can be seconds, minutes, hours, or days, depending on how long you need to remember. Software applications now exist that optimize spacing intervals based on your performance, making spaced repetition easier to implement. Mnemonics, memory aids, and strategies come in many forms. Acronyms use the first letter of each item to create a memorable word. ROY, GBIV, helps remember the colors of the rainbow. Rhymes and songs make information more memorable through rhythm and melody. You probably remember the alphabet in part because you learned it as a song. Chunking breaks long strings of information into meaningful units, as with phone numbers or social security numbers. The method of low CI or memory palace technique, used by ancient orators and modern memory champions alike, involves imagining a familiar location and mentally placing items you want to remember at specific locations along a path through that space. To recall the items, you mentally walk the path, encountering each item where you placed it. This works because it transforms abstract information into vivid visual spatial memories, leveraging brain systems that evolved for navigating physical space. Physical exercise benefits memory through multiple mechanisms. Aerobic exercise increases blood flow to the brain, delivers oxygen and nutrients more effectively, and promotes the release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein that supports the growth and survival of neurons. Exercise also promotes neurogenesis in the hippocampus. Studies show that regular aerobic exercise improves memory function and may reduce risk of dementia. Even moderate exercise like regular walking shows benefits. Diet affects brain health and memory. The Mediterranean diet, rich in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, fish, and healthy fats, like olive oil, has been associated with better cognitive function and reduced dementia risk. Omega-3 fatty acids found in fish like salmon and mackerel are particularly important for brain health. Antioxidants from colorful fruits and vegetables may protect against oxidative stress that damages neurons. Staying hydrated matters too. Even mild dehydration can impair concentration and memory. Sleep is absolutely crucial for memory consolidation. Prioritize getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. Maintain consistent sleep schedules. Create a sleep-conducive environment that's dark, quiet, and cool. Avoid screens before bed, as blue light interferes with melatonin production. If you're learning something new, studying before sleep, takes advantage of the consolidation that occurs overnight. Power naps can also benefit memory, particularly if they include slow-wave sleep. Stress management protects memory by preventing the damaging effects of chronic cortisol elevation. Find stress reduction techniques that work for you, whether meditation, yoga, deep breathing, time in nature, or engaging in hobbies. Social connection also buffers against stress and supports cognitive health. Loneliness and social isolation are risk factors for cognitive decline, while strong social networks appear protective. Mental stimulation throughout life builds cognitive reserve. Challenge your brain with new learning. Pick up a new language. Learn to play an instrument. Try puzzles and games that require thought. Importantly, novelty matters. Once an activity becomes routine, it provides less cognitive benefit. Keep seeking new challenges. Read diverse materials. Engage in complex discussions. The goal is to keep your brain actively working in varied ways. Managing cardiovascular health supports brain health. The same factors that contribute to heart disease also increase dementia risk. Control blood pressure and cholesterol. Manage diabetes if you have it. Don't smoke. These vascular risk factors damage the brain gradually over decades, so addressing them even in midlife can affect cognitive health in later years. Limiting alcohol consumption protects memory. While moderate drinking may not cause significant problems, heavy drinking clearly does. Even moderate drinking may have some negative cognitive effects. If you drink, do so in moderation. Be particularly cautious about binge drinking, which can cause acute blackouts and may have more lasting effects with repeated occurrences. Staying curious and engaged with life may be one of the most overlooked memory strategies. People who maintain curiosity, who continue learning and exploring throughout their lives, who find meaning and purpose in their activities, tend to maintain cognitive function better. Memory isn't just a mechanical process. It's intimately connected to attention, motivation, emotion, and meaning. When you care about something, when it matters to you, you naturally remember it better. These strategies aren't quick fixes. Memory improvement requires consistent effort over time, but the effort pays off. Better memory supports learning, productivity, relationships, and independence. It allows you to carry your past with you in a rich, detailed way that informs your present and future. Protecting and enhancing memory is protecting and enhancing your connection to your own life, your story, yourself. Strange and surprising memory. Facts. Beyond the familiar aspects of memory lie stranger territories, phenomena that reveal just how complex and sometimes bizarre memory can be. These surprising facts challenge assumptions and demonstrate that memory is far more multifaceted than everyday experience suggests. Muscle memory, though the name suggests muscles themselves remember, actually resides in the brain. When you learn a physical skill through practice, you're creating neural pathways in motor areas of your brain and cerebellum that code the precise sequence and timing of movements. With enough practice, these movements become automatic, requiring minimal conscious attention. This is why you can walk, type, or perform other well-practiced movements while thinking about something else entirely. The memory isn't in your muscles, but in the neural programs that control them. Interestingly, motor skills can be learned and refined during sleep. Studies show that people practicing a motor task improve not just during practice, but also overnight after sleep, even without additional practice. The brain appears to replay and refine the motor sequences during sleep, effectively practicing without any physical movement. This offline consolidation is one reason why sleep is so important for skill learning. Implicit memory can influence behavior without any conscious awareness. In studies of priming, exposure to a word or image makes related information more accessible later, even when people have no memory of the initial exposure. Someone shown the word doctor will later recognize the word nurse more quickly than if shown an unrelated word, a subtle effect they're completely unaware of. This demonstrates that your brain retains information and uses it to guide behavior, even when that information never reaches conscious awareness. Subliminal perception, perceiving stimuli below the threshold of conscious awareness, can create implicit memories that affect later behavior. While the effects are typically small and short-lived, nothing like the mind control sometimes portrayed in fiction, they're real and measurable. An image flashed too briefly to be consciously seen can still be processed and can influence subsequent judgments or choices in small ways. Cryptomnesia, unconscious plagiarism, where you remember information but forget its source, shows how memory preserves content more reliably than context. You might hear an idea or phrase, forget hearing it, and later produce it believing it's original. Many cases of alleged plagiarism likely stem from cryptomnesia rather than intentional copying. The memory is genuine, but the attribution is wrong, a source monitoring error your brain makes without you noticing. Context-dependent memory extends beyond physical location to mental context. You're better at remembering information when your mental state matches between encoding and retrieval. Students who study in a stressed state may perform better on tests if they're also stressed during the test, though obviously reducing stress at both times would be preferable. The similarity of context, both external and internal, serves as a retrieval cue. The Google effect, or digital amnesia, refers to the tendency to forget information that's easily available online. When you know you can look something up, you're less likely to commit it to memory. Research shows people are better at remembering where information is stored rather than the information itself. Instead of memorizing facts, you're essentially memorizing where to find facts, outsourcing memory to external devices. This changes how memory functions, but isn't necessarily bad. It frees up cognitive resources for other tasks. Imagination inflation describes how imagining an event can increase confidence that the event actually occurred. Simply imagining an experience makes it feel more familiar, and that familiarity can be misinterpreted as a memory. In studies, people who repeatedly imagine performing an action become more confident that they actually performed it, a finding with clear implications for understanding false memories. The serial position effect shows that position in a sequence affects memorability. Items at the beginning of a list are remembered better than items in the middle, an effect called the primacy effect. Items at the end are also remembered better, the recency effect. Middle items are most likely to be forgotten. This happens because early items get more rehearsal and make it into long-term memory, while late items are still in short-term memory. Middle items fall into a gap between these advantages. Childhood amnesia means almost no one remembers events from before age 3, but the exact age when continuous memories begin varies culturally. Children in cultures that emphasize personal narratives and discuss past events more elaborately tend to have earlier first memories than children in cultures where such discussion is less common. This suggests that the social practices around memory, how families talk about the past, influence memory development. Semantic satiation is the strange experience where repeating a word over and over makes it temporarily lose meaning, sounding like nonsense. The neural systems processing the word become temporarily fatigued from repeated activation. Your brain essentially adapts to the constant stimulus, and the word stops feeling like a word. This demonstrates that meaning isn't inherent in words, but emerges from active neural processing. The generation effect shows that information you generate yourself is remembered better than information you simply read. If you're trying to learn word pairs, you'll remember them better if you generate the second word from a cue, rather than being given both words. This happens because generation requires deeper processing and creates a more distinctive memory trace. The picture superiority effect demonstrates that pictures are remembered better than words. Show someone a series of pictures and words, and they'll recognize far more of the pictures than words later. Pictures engage visual processing systems more richly, creating more distinctive and elaborate memory traces. This is why illustrations, diagrams, and visualization techniques can be so effective for learning. Proactive interference occurs when old learning interferes with new learning. If you learn a new phone number, your old phone number might intrude, making the new one harder to remember. Retroactive interference is the opposite, new learning interfering with recall of old information. The new phone number might make it harder to remember the old one. Both types of interference demonstrate that memories don't exist in isolation, but interact, sometimes helping and sometimes hindering each other. The Zeigarnik effect describes how unfinished tasks are remembered better than completed ones. Once a task is completed, your brain can let it go. But uncompleted tasks create a kind of cognitive tension, keeping them more accessible in memory. This is why you might ruminate over unfinished work, but forget about completed projects. It's also why cliffhangers in stories are so effective at maintaining engagement. Change blindness reveals how selective memory and perception can be. When shown images that change subtly between views, people often fail to notice even dramatic changes if they're not specifically attending to that aspect. This happens because you don't actually encode a complete, detailed representation of scenes. You encode the aspects you attend to, and memory fills in the rest based on expectations. This shows how incomplete and selective your perception and memory of the world truly are. The Mandela effect refers to shared false memories, where large groups of people remember something incorrectly in the same way. The name comes from many people falsely remembering that Nelson Mandela died in prison in the 1980s, when he actually lived until 2013. Other examples include misremembering brand names or movie quotes. These shared false memories likely stem from source confusion, similar experiences, and social transmission of misinformation. These strange facts about memory reveal that your subjective experience of remembering doesn't necessarily reflect what's actually happening in your brain. Memory operates through multiple systems. Many processes occur outside awareness, and the feeling of remembering can be dissociated from accuracy. Your memory is not a camera recording reality, but an active, constructive system that creates something new each time you remember, influenced by factors you never notice and following rules you never consciously apply. The future of memory research. As we stand at the frontier of neuroscience, researchers are uncovering ever more intricate details about how memory works and developing technologies that would have seemed like science fiction just decades ago. The future of memory research holds both promise and profound questions about what it means to be human. Optogenetics, a revolutionary technique developed in the early 21st century, allows scientists to control specific neurons using light. By inserting light-sensitive proteins into particular brain cells, researchers can activate or silence those cells with pinpoint precision using laser light. This has enabled experiments that would have been impossible before, including the creation, erasure, and modification of specific memories in animal models. In landmark studies, researchers used optogenetics to implant false memories in mice. They activated specific cells in the hippocampus. While the mouse was in a safe environment, cells that had been active when the mouse was in a different location where it received a mild shock. The result was striking. The mouse now feared the safe environment, even though nothing bad had ever happened there. Its brain had formed an association between that place and fear, creating what amounts to a false memory. While such direct memory manipulation in humans remains science fiction, these animal studies reveal fundamental principles about how memories form and where they're stored. They show that memories exist as patterns of neural activity that can be artificially triggered, that the brain can form associations even when the linked elements never actually occurred together in reality, and that memory is fundamentally a pattern of connections that can potentially be read, written, and edited like code. Brain-computer interfaces are advancing rapidly, with devices that can read neural signals and translate them into commands for computers or prosthetic limbs. Some researchers envision future interfaces that could directly record memories or enhance memory function. Imagine being able to replay a memory as vividly as when it first formed, or to enhance your memory capacity by offloading storage to external devices that integrate seamlessly with your brain. Such possibilities raise profound ethical questions. Who owns memories? If memories can be edited, what happens to personal identity? If memory enhancement becomes possible, would it create unfair advantages? Should we allow the deletion of traumatic memories if the technology becomes available? These aren't merely hypothetical. As the science advances, society will need to grapple with these questions. Researchers are also exploring pharmaceutical interventions for memory. Drugs that enhance consolidation could help people with memory impairments or enhance learning in healthy individuals. Conversely, drugs that disrupt consolidation might be used to prevent traumatic memories from forming, administered shortly after a traumatic event to reduce PTSD risk. Early trials of such approaches have shown some promise, though much work remains to understand long-term effects and ethical implications. The search for effective Alzheimer's treatments continues intensely. While progress has been frustratingly slow, with many promising drugs failing in clinical trials, researchers are pursuing multiple approaches. Some target the amyloid plaques or tau tangles that characterize the disease. Others aim to reduce inflammation, support neuronal health, or enhance clearance of waste products from the brain. Early detection and prevention strategies are also being developed, with the hope that intervention before symptoms appear might be more effective than treating established disease. Understanding individual differences in memory is another frontier. Why do some people naturally have better memories than others? Genetics plays a role, with certain gene variants associated with better or worse memory performance. But environment, experience, and behavior matter enormously too. Researchers are working to identify the factors that create these differences, with the goal of helping everyone optimize their memory potential. The relationship between memory and imagination is receiving increased attention. Neuroscience has revealed that remembering the past and imagining the future activate remarkably similar brain networks. Both involve constructing mental scenarios by combining details in novel ways. This suggests that memory evolved not just to preserve the past, but to enable flexible thinking about the future, to simulate possibilities and plan accordingly. Understanding this connection could lead to new approaches for enhancing both memory and creative thinking. Collective memory, how groups remember shared experiences and how those memories shape culture and identity, represents another area of growing research. Memories aren't just individual but social, shared through stories, commemorations, and cultural practices. How societies remember historical events, including traumatic events like wars or atrocities, shapes present-day attitudes and behaviors. Understanding collective memory has implications for education, reconciliation, and social cohesion. The possibility of preserving human memories beyond death has long been a subject of speculation. While we cannot yet capture a person's memories and transfer them to another brain or computer, the rapid advance of neuroscience and artificial intelligence makes such ideas less fantastical than they once seemed. Some researchers are exploring whether brain scanning and AI could eventually create models of individual minds detailed enough to capture something of a person's memories and personality. These frontiers of memory research reveal that we're still in early stages of understanding this fundamental aspect of mind. Every answer raises new questions. Every technique that lets us probe deeper reveals new layers of complexity. The brain's capacity to store, retrieve, and use memories remains one of nature's most impressive achievements, and fully understanding it remains one of science's greatest challenges. As research progresses, it will undoubtedly transform not just our understanding, but our lived experience of memory. Technologies may emerge that enhance, modify, or preserve memories in ways we can barely imagine now. These changes will raise questions about authenticity, identity, and what it means to remember. They'll challenge us to think carefully about which aspects of memory we want to preserve or change, and which we should leave alone. Memory in everyday life. Beyond the laboratory and clinic, memory suffuses every moment of daily existence in ways both obvious and subtle. Understanding how memory operates in everyday contexts reveals its profound importance and provides practical insights for navigating modern life more effectively. Prospective memory, remembering to do things in the future, is crucial for daily functioning, yet often overlooked in discussions of memory. This is the memory you use when you need to remember to take medication at a specific time, to pick up milk on the way home, or to call someone back later. Unlike retrospective memory, which involves recalling the past, prospective memory requires holding an intention and executing it at the appropriate moment. Prospective memory can fail in two ways. You might forget the intention entirely, never thinking about it when the time comes, or you might remember the intention, but at the wrong time, too early or too late to act on it. Both types of failure are common and can range from minor inconveniences to serious problems, such as forgetting to take necessary medication. Interestingly, prospective memory appears to decline with age, even when other memory functions remain relatively stable. Older adults often report and demonstrate more prospective memory failures than younger adults. However, this decline is less pronounced for habitual prospective memory tasks, like taking daily medication at the same time, than for infrequent tasks. This suggests that routinization can help compensate for age-related changes. Reminders and external memory aids are powerful tools for supporting prospective memory. Writing things down, setting phone alarms, using calendars, and creating environmental cues all reduce the burden on internal memory. There's no shame in using these tools. They're forms of cognitive enhancement that work with your brain's limitations rather than fighting against them. Source memory, remembering where you learned information, becomes increasingly important in the modern information environment. With constant exposure to news, social media, advertising, and entertainment, it's easy to encounter the same information from multiple sources, making it difficult to track where you first heard something or whether it came from a reliable source. This contributes to the spread of misinformation. People remember claims but forget the source, and over time, familiarity with a claim can be mistaken for evidence of its truth. The illusory truth effect demonstrates this phenomenon. Repeated exposure to a statement increases belief in its accuracy, even when there's no new evidence supporting it, and even when people initially didn't believe it. The mere repetition creates familiarity, and the brain misinterprets that familiarity as a signal of truth. This is why propaganda and advertising rely so heavily on repetition. It's not just about keeping a message in mind, but about exploiting the way familiarity influences memory and belief. Autobiographical memory, your memory for your own life story, shapes identity and guides behavior in profound ways. The memories you hold about your past, especially emotionally significant events and turning points, form the narrative you tell about who you are. This life story isn't an objective chronicle, but a constructed narrative that emphasizes certain events while downplaying or forgetting others, extracting themes and meanings that create coherence. People's life stories tend to follow culturally shaped narrative forms. In Western cultures, the redemptive narrative, where suffering leads to growth and positive transformation, is particularly common and valued. Someone might frame a difficult period as the time they discovered their inner strength or found their true calling. This isn't necessarily false, but it reflects how memory selectively emphasizes elements that fit the narrative arc. The stories you tell about your past can actually change your memories of those events. Each time you recount an experience, you're not just reporting a memory but actively reconstructing it, potentially incorporating new details, interpretations, or emphasis. Over time, the story you've told may replace or overshadow the original memory. You come to remember the story rather than the event itself. Collaborative memory, how memory works in social contexts, reveals that remembering is often a group activity. Couples, families, and work teams develop shared memories and often remember together, with different people contributing different details. This collaboration can enhance memory, with group recall often exceeding what any individual could remember alone. But it can also create conformity pressure, where the socially dominant version of an event becomes the remembered version, even for those who initially recalled it differently. Transactive memory systems emerge in close relationships. Couples often divide responsibility for remembering different types of information. One person might handle social commitments, while the other tracks finances. Each person serves as an external memory store for the other. This is efficient, but creates vulnerability. If the relationship ends, or one person develops memory problems, the other may struggle with domains they've long outsourced. Eyewitness confidence, the certainty with which people claim to remember events, deserves special attention given its outsized influence on juries and investigators. Research consistently shows that confidence and accuracy are only weakly correlated for eyewitness memory. People can be absolutely certain and completely wrong. Unfortunately, confident eyewitnesses are very persuasive, leading to wrongful convictions when that confidence is misplaced. Several factors can inflate confidence without improving accuracy: repeated questioning, feedback from investigators, exposure to information after the event, and time to commit to a particular version of events can all increase confidence, even when the underlying memory is inaccurate. Legal reforms aim to address these issues through proper interview techniques, double-blind lineups, and better jury instructions about the fallibility of eyewitness testimony. Flashbacks, vivid intrusive memories often associated with PTSD, represent a special category of autobiographical memory. Unlike ordinary memories that you choose to retrieve, flashbacks intrude unbidden, triggered by reminders of the traumatic event. They can feel like re-experiencing rather than remembering, with vivid sensory details and strong emotional reactions. The person may know intellectually that they're safe, but feel as if the trauma is happening again. Understanding flashbacks as memories gone awry, stored in a fragmented way that makes them prone to uncontrolled triggering, has led to therapeutic approaches that aim to help integrate these memories into normal autobiographical memory. By repeatedly accessing the memory in a safe context while processing the emotions and creating a coherent narrative, The memory can gradually lose its intrusive quality and become more like an ordinary painful memory, sad but not overwhelming. Prospective person memory, remembering information about people you know, is essential for social functioning. You remember names, faces, relationships, preferences, personal history, and countless details about the people in your life. This memory involves multiple systems: face recognition, semantic memory for facts about the person, episodic memory for experiences you've shared, and emotional memory for your feelings toward them. Name memory, notoriously difficult for many people, deserves special mention. Names are arbitrary labels with no inherent meaning connecting them to the people they identify. This makes them particularly challenging to encode and retrieve. Strategies like paying close attention when introduced, repeating the name immediately, making meaningful associations, and using the name in conversation all help. But even with these strategies, names often prove slippery, one of the most common memory complaints. Habit memory, the formation of automatic behavioral routines through repetition, operates largely outside conscious awareness, but profoundly shapes daily life. Much of what you do each day happens automatically without conscious decision or effort. You follow routines for getting ready in the morning, commuting to work, and preparing meals. These habits free cognitive resources for other tasks, but can also become so automatic that you perform them with no memory of doing so, like driving somewhere and realizing you don't remember the drive. The automaticity of habits can be both blessing and curse. Habits allow efficient functioning, but can be hard to change when they're no longer serving you well. Understanding that habits are essentially procedural memories, patterns of behavior encoded through repetition, helps explain why changing them requires not just deciding to change, but actually replacing the old pattern with a new one through repeated practice. Memory for dreams fades uniquely quickly. Most dreams are forgotten within minutes of waking. Those you do remember are typically from the final dream period before waking, or dreams from which you wake directly. This rapid fading may relate to the neurochemistry of sleep. During REM sleep, when most vivid dreams occur, the brain's memory encoding systems aren't fully active, making it difficult for dream content to consolidate into lasting memories. People who keep dream journals and write down dreams immediately upon waking can remember far more of their dreams than those who don't. This suggests dreams are encoded at least temporarily, but require deliberate effort to consolidate before they fade. The content of dreams you do remember can be influenced by what you experienced before sleep, your current concerns, and your emotional state, showing that even in sleep, memory continues to process and integrate experiences. These everyday manifestations of memory demonstrate that memory isn't just about explicit recollection of facts and events. It's woven through every aspect of life, shaping perceptions, guiding behavior, supporting relationships, and creating the experience continuity of self. Understanding how memory operates in daily contexts empowers you to work with it more effectively and to recognize both its capabilities and limitations. Closing reflection. And so we come to rest at the end of our journey through the landscape of memory. We've wandered through neural architecture and chemical cascades, through the formation of memories and their fragile reconstruction. We've visited the peaks of exceptional ability and the valleys of impairment, traced memory's path across the lifespan, and through the prism of emotion. We've discovered that memory is not one thing, but many. Not a filing cabinet, but a living, breathing process. Not a camera recording the past, but a storyteller weaving narrative from scattered threads. What emerges from all these facts is a profound appreciation for how central memory is to human existence. Without memory, there would be no learning, no relationships, no sense of self. You would exist only in a fleeting present, disconnected from your past and unable to imagine your future. Memory gives you continuity, identity, meaning. It connects each moment to all the moments that came before, creating the story of your life. Yet memory is also remarkably fallible. It reconstructs rather than records, fills gaps with plausible fabrications, confidently asserts things that never happened, and sometimes loses precious moments you desperately want to keep. This fallibility is not a flaw, but a feature. Perfect memory, as cases of hypothymesia show, can be as burdensome as blessing. The ability to forget, to generalize, to update memories with new information, these are essential to adaptive functioning. Your memory is accurate or not, complete or fragmented, vivid or faded, are the raw material from which you construct your sense of who you are. They're the stories you tell yourself about your life, and in those stories, emotional truth sometimes matters more than photographic accuracy. The memory of your grandmother's warmth matters whether or not you remember every detail correctly. The lessons you drew from experiences shape you, whether or not your memory of those experiences is perfectly accurate. Understanding how memory works empowers you to use it more effectively. You can employ strategies that work with your brain's natural processes. You can protect your memory through lifestyle choices. You can appreciate its limitations, holding your recollections a bit more lightly, allowing for the possibility that others remember things differently, not because one of you is wrong, but because memory is inherently subjective and reconstructive. You can also have compassion for those whose memory fails them. The person with Alzheimer's gradually losing their life story. The child struggling in school because working memory won't hold the information long enough to process it. The trauma survivor haunted by intrusive memories they can't forget. Memory difficulties can be devastating, and understanding the neuroscience doesn't diminish the human impact. As you rest now, your brain continues its work. The hippocampus and cortex dialogue, consolidating today's experiences into tomorrow's memories. Some of what you learn tonight will stick, transform during sleep into lasting traces. Other parts will fade, returning to the biochemical substrate from which all thoughts arise and to which they return. That's okay. That's how memory works. What matters is the journey, the exploration, the gentle expansion of understanding. You carry within your skull one of the most complex structures in the known universe. Billions of neurons connected in trillions of synaptic patterns, creating the miracle of memory, thought, and consciousness. And tonight, as that marvelous structure settles into sleep, let it work its ancient magic. Let that memories consolidate. Let neural pathways strengthen. Let the day's experiences gradually transform into tomorrow's wisdom. Thank you for spending this time exploring the mysteries of memory with me. If this helped you unwind or sparked your curiosity, consider liking this video and subscribing to Whispered Knowledge for more gentle explorations of fascinating topics. I hope you sleep well, dream softly, and wake with a few new memories of your own. Good night.